The same machines, the same surroundings. Shirtwaists, shirtwaists, and more shirtwaists.
The presser, the cutter, the wringer, the mangle, the needle, the union, the treadle, the bobbin, the cord. The infamous blaze at the Triangle Factory in 1911. 146 died in the flames on the 9th floor. No hydrants, no fire escapes. The witness in a building across the street who watched how a young man helped a girl to step up to the windowsill, then held her out away from the masonry wall and let her drop. And then another, as if he were helping them up to enter a streetcar, and not eternity.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, one of the most horrific industrial disasters in U.S. history, happened on March 25, 1911. During the time of the factory's prominence, the owners explored new technology, which led to dangerous and unsafe encounters in the workplace and to the ultimate exchange of lives for profit. At the factory, the item being produced was the most fashionable item of women's clothing at the time, shirtwaists. The building, now known as the Brown Building, but then called the Ash Building, was in New York City. The factory occupied the 8th, 9th, and 10th levels of the 10-story building, with people working on the 8th and 9th levels and the executives on the 10th. The Industrial Revolution was just coming to an end, leaving its mark with new technology and machines for factories of mass production. The revolution produced many new inventions that changed many things from being done by hand to being done by machine. Clothing factories used new sewing machines to achieve higher production levels and higher profits. The owners of the factory, Isaac Harris and Max Blanc, both immigrants themselves, were known as shirtwaist kings for their monopoly. They were in favor of strict discipline in the workplace, enforcing long hours and low wages. They were especially careful that no assets were lost by making sure that no workers left with any merchandise or supplies. They locked workers in during the day, and they all had to have their bags checked before leaving. Blank and Harris moved into the Ash Building very soon after it was built. It was much more modern than most other factories. They used newer sewing machines and packed workers into the factories, and the combination of those two especially quickened the process of production, so they were making more and more profit.
Getting a job in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was a pretty desired position because they were working in a much more modern factory environment. High ceilings, big windows, compared to the whole stove heated, dusty, hugely crowded sweatshop rooms.
The majority of the workers in the factory were young immigrant girls, predominantly from Europe and Russia. They were in New York City, the most common destination for immigrants during this time of mass migration. They usually brought very little with them and had very little once they were settled.
These young girls weren't just earning money for their own clothes or to, go out to a dance hall or to Coney Island. They were earning money to support the family.
The girls worked under incredibly harsh conditions and received very low wages for their labor. They had no breaks to stand up or stretch or to even get water. Everything was crowded with little ventilation. The girls were working for 14 hours a day for $2, sometimes even less.
Bosses are under such intense competitive pressure that they're prepared to ignore, under most circumstances, the grievances of their workers, to treat them like shtuka, like animals, like pieces.
Despite their usually long hours, on Saturdays, the workers were done at 4:45. Just as they were leaving, the fire started and would become one of the greatest accidents in history. It spread very quickly due to all of the cloth lying around.
One day on Saturday, we were always ready to leave. We smelled smoke. All of a sudden, you got a terrible panic. Everybody was running to the door. It was locked. And unfortunately, 146 people died in that fire.
The doors were locked so that the girls couldn't leave, but that meant they were trapped during the fire. They would have had to take the elevator, but those could only hold so many people, and the only other way out was the fire escape, which collapsed from the girls' weight. Girls would jump out of the building from the 8th and 9th stories, some of them even on fire. Harris and Blanc went to the roof and got onto the next building and saved themselves.
I want to know what the executives are doing. And I ran towards the 10th floor. And when I came there, they saved themselves. My dress over my head, and I got myself on the roof. I met the firemen, and I had tears in my eyes. There was a distance from the roof to the top of the adjacent building. They had to hoist me up, and that's the way I got on the other side. And they brought me towards the stairs. I sat down on every stoop and cried till I was in the street. When I came in the street, here comes my father. He collapsed. He fainted. And I didn't go back to work anymore. I went to college.
To this day, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire is one of the worst workplace disasters in history. There were mass funerals to honor those who died in the fire, such as the International Ladies Garment Workers Union's funeral procession. With the youngest victim only 14, the girls are remembered every year by their names being written on the sidewalks by their old homes. Harris and Blanc were both charged with 6 counts of manslaughter and 2 of the 146 deaths, but they were acquitted of all charges brought against them. The public was outraged and called for further charges, which the district attorney did do, but the jury found them not guilty again. Although they didn't have any prison time for their wrongdoings, as a settlement for all of the lawsuits, they had to pay $75 to each victim's family. Later in 1911, the Factory Investigation Commission was established to check workplace safety across the state. It was one of the first steps taken towards improving health and safety conditions in factories across the state. Although there were many reforms over time in the U.S. and other developed countries, sadly history repeated itself in 2012 in the devastating Tazreen fashion factory outside of Dhaka, Bangladesh. The similarities between the two factories were striking. In the factory, it was mostly young girls unable to escape from the fire because of few escapes and precautions. There were so many people cramped in a tiny space, so escape was near impossible. Again, it was large corporations such as Walmart and Sears who had merchandise produced there, and they allegedly knew that their factories would become death traps. Overall, it is important to realize that safety and health regulations must come before profit, and the use of new technology means nothing if it isn't safe. Harris and Blanc found out for themselves that exploring new ways of mass production led to dangerous workplace encounters and to the exchange of lives for profit, making the real 3 sides of the Triangle Shirtwaist fire.
That's the whole trouble of this fire. Nobody cares. Nobody. 146 people in a half an hour? I have always tears in my eyes when I think of it. It should never have happened. The executives with a couple steps could have opened the door. What the heck are they better than the working people? It's not fair. Because material, money, it's more important here than everything. That's the biggest mistake, that a person doesn't count much when he hasn't got money. What good is a rich man and he hasn't got a heart? I don't pretend. I feel it. It's terrible. I feel very bad about it.